Okay, thank you, Victor. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And happy December. Happy snowfall. Happy winter is here. So, just being present to yourself, being here fully as you listen. Listening with your heart, not necessarily trying to understand everything with your mind, but just allow your heart to receive whatever you need. For many years, I was a pastoral counselor. I worked with people in all sorts of settings, but very often it was a situation where there was a calamity, a disaster, a sudden loss, very often a sudden death of a partner or an accident or all sorts of strange circumstances. But always when someone would come to me for counseling, the first thing they would ask is, why? You know, when I'm sure you recall times when you've heard someone dies unexpectedly, or there's, especially if there's an accident or something like that, the mind says, why did this happen? Now, we don't ask ourselves, why does the sun come up in the morning? Because that's part of our belief that this happens every day and this is normal and this is what life is. But when someone dies suddenly or when there's a change in our life, in our finances, our relationships, our body, whatever it may be, there may not be a place where we understand that. It's like this doesn't belong. It's like there's a puzzle with a piece missing. Sometimes a huge piece, it feels like it's missing. And if you've ever done a jigsaw puzzle and you can't find the last piece and you're crawling around on your hands and knees looking for it under the table or whatever, but it's like there's this missing piece or something that doesn't quite make sense here. And so we often feel that as kind of a hole or an emptiness inside of us. And the mind just can't get around that type of thing. Because the answer to the question why is something that's not available to us. Science tells us how, but it doesn't tell us why. The mind doesn't know why. So the heart creates a why. And very often when we're young children, when things happen, parents get divorced, one of the parents dies or leaves or abandons the family or is unavailable, children automatically want to know why. What's the meaning to this? And so often the meaning they give to it is that it's somehow their fault. Because otherwise, if it wasn't their fault, they'd have no control whatever to what happens in their lives, which is really the reality of it. But we don't want to believe that we have no control over what happens in our lives. So we create a sense of meaning. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, German philosopher, said, he who knows why can bear almost any how, or any what, if you will. In other words, the individual that has a sense of meaning to their experience can bear a painful or difficult experience. But if there's no meaning, it's extremely painful, sometimes almost unbearable. And people that are depressed often will say they can't experience any sense of meaning in their life. People that are suicidal feel like their life is meaningless. And so this sense of meaning is very, very core part of who we are as human beings. It's a core part of our ego structure, is this construct of our answer to why. So the sense of meaning is the core of the personal self. The sense of meaning is really a story, in a way, a narrative. It's a story of who I am, who other people are, what the world is all about. You see. And that story that we create as a child and is typically corroborated by our family. You know, I'm not okay, I'm smart, I'm bright, I need to do this, I should do that. I'm loved, I'm not loved. All of this becomes part of our sense of self. And then we also project that meaning out to the world. And so that meaning gets filled up. That meaning fills the gaps. You know, for example, you're walking down the street, you see a friend of yours on the other side of the street. You wave at them. They look at you and don't wave back. What does that mean? Well, that's up to you. But we can make up all sorts of meanings about that, right? They don't like me, what did I do? They're sure not polite, they're not aware. Maybe don't want to be friends anymore. All sorts of stories get created, you say, when something happens that we don't expect. The saying, I don't know, living in the I don't know, is very difficult because we want to make meaning to the world because that's how we survived. That's how we survived. Meaning is like our operating system, if you will. It's the matrix that holds everything else. And we tend to associate with people that have the same sense of meaning that we do. That becomes our culture. In fact, that's almost the definition of culture. A culture is a group of people that have a certain sense of meaning, a certain worldview. I mean, language is part of it, but it's much more than language. So you and I have a different worldview than someone that was born in China 500 years ago, or someone that was born in India 2,000 years ago. Their sense of meaning, their sense of self, their sense of worldview would be very, very different than ours. And of course, we have people sitting next to us, we have people living next to us that may have very different worldviews than we do. So the meaning that we give to life as we seek to associate with others that have a similar meaning, that becomes the we. That's the us. And those that have very different sense of meaning, those that have a sense of meaning, a worldview that's contrary to ours, typically that becomes them. So meaning, worldview defines me, us, we. Our tribe, if you will, our culture, our people, versus those other people, whatever they are. So worldview and culture and meaning are very similar. Worldview is a term that's used to ascribe how we generally interpret the world and everything in it, everything that happens. It describes what our values are, what's important, what's true, what's good, what's real, what's beautiful. Even our standards of beauty are tied into our worldview. Our standard of what's right, what's wrong. And interestingly enough, there's been some research done on various worldviews, and it's noticed that throughout history, different worldviews predominated in different cultures and in different eras. And even in our country, there are very different worldviews as we're seeing today. So it can be helpful to understand some of the possibilities of how others see the world. And in that, seeing how they see the world can create for us a sense of empathy, understanding, and give us perhaps a better perspective on how we see the world. Because so much of the time, meaning is implicit. And implicit means it's embedded and it's unexamined. Like I say, it's the operating system in your computer. You don't see the operating system, but it's what holds everything together. And that's what our worldview, our sense of meaning, holds things together for our tribe, our group, or we, whatever that may be. So I just wanted to talk briefly about what some of the different worldviews are, just to help us get an understanding of where we are as individuals and as a group. Excuse me. So in our world today, one worldview, and this is the oldest worldview, perhaps, is one that's defined by what one wants, what I want. It's called the red. These worldviews are given colors. This is a research that's done out of Claire Graves originated it some years back, and then it became popular through the work of Don Beck. And it's become, he used it under the term of spiral dynamics, which some of you may be familiar with. But what's important is to recognize that these different worldviews are just as valid or invalid as their own, even though we think ours is the right one. That's what we're identified with. So the red worldview is based on raw power. I want it, might makes right. I want it, I take it. Fortunately, that's not the majority in our world today or in our nation today, but it does exist. In the Middle East, for example, the warlords, the tribal communities, and in our nation, the gangs and the criminal element tend to be in the red. You know, I want it, therefore I'm going to take it. So it's amoral. It doesn't even consider what's right and what's wrong. It doesn't care what's right and what's wrong. You see, there is no remorse. There is no sense of, I shouldn't have done that. It's like, I did it, and if it satisfies me, then it's the right thing to do. We see this in individuals, but most of the time we see it in tribes and cultures other than our own. And it's estimated, the researchers estimated that maybe 10% of the world is at this particular worldview of red. And again, it's often confined to the lesser developed countries or to the Middle East, to the tribal communities. More familiar to us is the next stage that evolved out of red, and that is the blue worldview. The blue worldview is about obedience. See, the red is about, I want it, I'm going to take it. Blue is a remedy for that lawlessness. The blue is very much focused on what's right. And what's right is defined by some authority. And that authority could be God, could be some religious figure, it could be a nation, could be a patriotism. Today we see that politics has got much of the same fervor that religion had hundreds of years ago. You know, in our country at one time, religion, Christianity was not only the norm, but it dictated everything. You know, the Civil War, the Union soldiers would go into the war singing the battle hymn of the Republic. And then the rebels would sing way down south, in the land of cotton. So there's this sense of us, a sense of this is what life means. And when we get two very strong, entrenched worldviews bumping up against one another, wanting to live in the same place, wanting to control the same government or the same organization even, then we get clashes. And it can be helpful to see what's behind some of those clashes. So the blue meme is the meme of loyalty. That's the highest value of blue is loyalty. Just as the highest view of red is power, highest value, I should say, of blue is power, red is power. The highest value of blue is loyalty. Loyalty to a larger authority. Religion, to the nation. Military is very blue. You know, what's the motto of the Marine Corps? Semper Fi, right? Always faithful. And that's the whole idea of when you're a soldier, first thing you do is obey. You know, creativity is not encouraged. Individualism is not encouraged, generally. What's encouraged is loyalty and obedience. See, that's the blooming. So if you go into many churches today, you'll see that blue meme very, very strongly of obedience and faith. And that's probably the largest worldview in our world today. But it's estimated about 40% of the people on this planet are at that perception of blue. The next one to emerge is the orange, And that's the highest value or highest virtue of orange is to accomplish something. Orange is I create. Orange is the scientific revolution. Orange is the Renaissance. Orange is just do it. It's not about loyalty to a higher power. It's about doing something, accomplishing something, creating it yourself. So it's a very self-oriented. Your life is up to you. That's a yellow or the orange meme. I create. I understand. That's important. Understanding is important. So science is very much a defining of the orange meme. Capitalism is in the orange. Again, just do it, build it, sell it. All of that is part of the orange machine, meme machine. And it's estimated that about 30% of the planet is in orange, about 1/3. And however, orange is really the dominant, the driver in our world today. That's what connects all countries, even though we may have very different religious views, different political views. You know, we still connect at orange. We still create. We still share goods. We still trade. Commerce is part of orange, you say. So it's very practical. Does it work? It's not a matter of loyalty, it's a matter of doing it. Then the next one is the green meme, the green worldview, and that's one that we should, most of us, I think, are familiar with. It's the meme that says, I care. It's the meme, the worldview that says the highest value is empathy, compassion. So green is the ecological movement. It's all of the human rights movements and so forth. That's the green meme. And it's estimated that about 20% of the world is a green. Now, what's important is, once again, all of these worldviews are implicit, which means, for the most part, they haven't been examined. We assume that they're true. We see the world through this lens, and we assume that that's the right way. And anyone or any group that sees it differently, at best, they're misguided. At worst, they're the enemy. And so, turning to our Dharma practice, what I want to point out is that one of the most important things we can become aware of is the meaning that we've created for our life. So that meaning is no longer embedded and implicit, it's explicit. You don't have to change it, you don't have to challenge it. But what meaning am I creating for myself? When something happens, I respond a certain way, but based on the meaning that I give to what happened. You know, if somebody insults me and I interpret that as a compliment, I'm going to respond as if it's a compliment, whether or not that's what they mean. So that it's our interpretation that creates the understanding we have for the world. And that understanding is what creates us and them. And it's what creates our culture, our world today. So the Dharma would say, in this context, Dharma is more than just a meme, but just a worldview. The Dharma would say, I'm aware. I am aware. Nothing is implicit. So I'm aware of every meaning that I give to my life experience. The Dharma doesn't say you should, this means this or that means that. It simply says, be aware. Just know. Just know. Because meaning is something we create. It's not real. It's not a given reality. It's not something that's impermanent. It's not something that has a self. But it's something that's very, very powerful in our life experience. And as such, it really is important to find out what meaning am I giving to the world and how is that impacting the way I live my life. So the next time you're watching the news or somebody doesn't show up for an appointment or whatever happens, just notice what meaning am I giving to that? How am I interpreting that? How do I interpret what is happening in our world today? So I need to stop here because of the time constraint, but I want to dedicate this Dharma talk to the well-being of all beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. May all beings be aware. Thank you for sharing your practice.